In previous videos, I've made reference to a template.php file. The template.php file, in general, is the one place where you'll find PHP logic inside of a theme. Anytime you feel tempted to put some logic inside of a template file, for example, usually the template.php file is a better place for that. By separating out all of that logic into the template.php file, you allow themers to be able to focus on just working with the template files and not having to work with that PHP logic. In a template file, you can find a variety of elements, and I just wanted to go over what you might find in there briefly. First of all, you'll find pre-processing functions, and we'll talk about pre-processing functions more extensively later, but what they basically allow you to do is to adjust the output of certain items in a template file before they get rendered. So if you want to adjust the structure of the submitted by content that's underneath a title, for example, you can change that in a pre-processing function, and it's better to do so there than in the template.php file. You'll also find process functions or processing functions, which are the same as pre-processing functions, except that they're simply triggered after all of the pre-processing functions have run already. Next, you'll find theme function overrides. So any theme functions that begin with theme underscore and then something after that can be overridden on the theme layer. Now, if you've been watching the videos on module building, you know that they can be overridden in modules as well, but the theme layer works the same way. And whether you decide to override it on the module level or the theme level depends on who's going to be modifying them later. You'll also find some utility functions that don't quite fall into any of these categories, but are used by pre-processing functions or theme functions inside of that template.php file. And sometimes it makes sense to bundle a bunch of logic up into a separate function that's going to be reused, for example. And finally, you might see CSS file and JavaScript file alter functions, which will change which files are being included in that ultimate template file. So sometimes, for example, in one of the core themes, the vertical tabs CSS is changed because it needs to change the general look of them, and so it's switching out the original core CSS file for the one that matches up with the theme instead. Let's begin by taking a look at a few template.php files that are used in Drupal core themes. So go ahead and navigate to your themes directory. It's right here in your base Drupal directory. Let's go ahead and open up Bartik first. And inside of this directory, go ahead and open up the template.php file. All right, we're just going to take a brief look down this file and look at the functions that are being called and what their role is. Sometimes template.php files can be a little daunting. As we scroll through here, you see there's a lot of code, there's a lot of comments, and it looks pretty dense. So one way to kind of break it down is by looking at the list of function names that are inside of this template.php file, and beginning from there, getting an outline of it. And this can also give you a feel for the types of things that this template.php file is doing. In Komodo, the development environment that I use here, there's this link at the very bottom of the page with this green dot, and if you click it, you can see a list of the functions that are being defined inside of this page. So you see this is pretty finite. There's only about 10 functions here. And we can get a feel by looking at the name of the function, the structure of it, what they're doing. So this one has the word pre-process in it, which means that it's a pre-process function. We have process, process, pre-process, process, process, pre-process, pre-process. And then only these last two here are ones that aren't pre-process or process functions. So these are our only wildcards. We don't necessarily know what these are all about. Chances are these are theme overrides. And if we click one of these, it'll jump to it. And we can see here that this is implementing theme menu tree, which is one way of saying that this is an override of theme menu tree. And then if we look at the next function here, implements theme field type, which again is an override of a theme function. So besides process, pre-process, and theme overrides, there's really nothing else inside of this template file. Let's go ahead and take a look briefly at each function and get a feel for what it's trying to do. The first function here is Bartik preprocess HTML. Now we haven't talked about the HTML template file yet, but we have talked about the page template file. The HTML template file wraps around the page template file and gives it the HTML and body tags that you may be familiar with when working with HTML files. And then it also adds the header tags like the script tags that bring in the JavaScript files and the style sheet tags that bring in the style sheets as well. What's happening up here at the top of this function is that classes are being added to this classes array variable here, which will get pulled into the body tag. Now the advantage to having classes at the body tag level is that it makes it much easier for selectors, CSS selectors and JavaScript selectors, to specify particular pieces of content to manipulate. And so it's checking to see if various regions are filled with any content, and if so, it's adding classes to the body tag to trigger particular selectors inside of the style sheets or JavaScript files. And then finally here at the bottom, it's adding a couple of CSS files too. Okay. Bartik process HTML happens after all of the pre-processing has occurred for the HTML template file. And it's just running the color HTML alter function, which is part of the color module that allows the end user to select colors for the theme with a nice sort of gradient selector. And it's got to do some preparation on the variables in order to apply those colors properly. Okay, I'm going to scroll down. We have Bartik process page, and we're familiar with the page.tpl.php file. The logic that's happening inside of this function is typically going to affect the variables that are being used inside of the page.tpl.php file. We see that the color module is being invoked here if it exists. And then we're setting some variables to use within the template file. It's checking to see if the site name is enabled and the slogan is enabled. And if they're not, then this particular theme is going to display it anyways, but it's going to display it as a hidden item so that screen readers can view this particular information as well. So it's just saying that we're setting these hide site name and hide site slogan so that we can use those for some logic later on. Then we have a few more pieces that are like that. Let's go ahead and scroll down. We have Bartik preprocess maintenance page, which happens before the maintenance page displays. Now the maintenance page is triggered whenever the site is in maintenance mode. So when a regular user or an anonymous user comes to the site, they'll see the maintenance page. And this is just setting some variables for that and pulling in a CSS file. Bartik process maintenance page happens right after the pre-process functions run. And this is doing some of this hiding of the site name and site slogan, but still embedding it inside of the HTML. Scrolling down. Bartik pre-process node will happen before a node template is rendered. So this is anytime a node is embedded on a page. And it's restructuring the submitted structure that displays typically under the title of a node. And then if particular criteria are met, an additional class is added to the body tag. We have a pre-processing function for blocks. And as we scroll down, we have our two theming functions that are overrides of menu tree and taxonomy term reference. Okay,